Hello, Bobs. We're back with Popular Entertainments Through the Ages by Samuel McKechnie, a Benjamin Blom release from 1969, even though the book was written earlier. This is a reprint. And that is a beer. Can we fucking put it in there, bruv? Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 4, bruv. I'm gonna put a thing on there. Pop. This is pop. Decent foam's good. Let's open this. We will turn that off and we'll get to the book. Chapter 4, Puppets. Even though in the index it says Punch and Judy, it is Puppets. Puppets. The most popular of all puppets has fallen on evil days. In the comical tragedy, however, Punch survives all dangers and routs his many enemies. His present struggle for existence is not likely to end in his being vanquished. For one thing, puppets, of whose family he is the most distinguished member, have for thousands of years survived the opposition of many forms of popular entertainment. Not to go as far afield as the subject might take us, the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans had puppets, and it is not at all unlikely that when Rome fell and the mimes took to the weary roads, they carried puppets with them. It is not known when puppets came to England, but they were arousing enthusiasm early in the 16th century. Some account has already been given of their subsequent popularity. The origin of Punch has also been outlined. The date of Punch's arrival in England as a puppet is uncertain, but most of the evidence seems to indicate that he crossed with the Royalists in 1660. J. Payne Collier believed that he came with King William in 1688. In the latter year, a poem appeared in which it was stated that Punchinello had been thrice shown to the king. The reference was introduced in connection with a puppet show at Bartholomew Fair. As the fair took place in September, whereas William did not land until November and was not crowned until the following year, he was not the king referred to. There are earlier mentions of Punch, once in 1669 by Pepys, who was pleased to hear some poor people call their fat child Punch, which had become a word of common use for all that is thick and short. In 1703, Punch appeared in a booth at Bartholomew Fair, not in a play like the modern one, devoted entirely to his own adventures, but as a character in a well-established favorite, the old creation of the world, which was newly revived with the addition of Noah's flood. An announcement ran, "The last scene does present Noah and his family coming out of the ark with all the beasts, two by two, and all the fowls of the air seen in a prospect, sitting upon the trees. Likewise, over the ark is seen the sun rising in a most glorious manner. Moreover, a multitude of angels will be seen in a double rank, which presents a double prospect, one for the sun, the other for a palace, where will be seen angels ringing six bells. Likewise, machines descend from above, double and treble, with dives rising out of hell, and Lazarus seen in Abraham's bosom. Besides, several figures dancing jigs, sarabands, and country dances, to the admiration of all spectators, with the merry conceits of Squire Punch and Sir John Spendle. The creation of the world was one of the most popular subjects of the old miracle plays, and the modern play of which Punch is the hero is also of a medieval type. The particular play in which alone he now takes the stage, says Sir E.K. Chambers, although certainly not a miracle play, follows closely upon the traditional lines of the moralities. In 1709, very successful performances of the old creation of the world were given in Bath by Powell, a puppet showman of great ingenuity and skill. Punch and his wife were introduced dancing in the ark, wrote Steele in the Tatler, where in several papers he good-naturedly bantered the showman. I know the whole of his tricks, and that it is only by means of these wires that the eye of the spectator is cheated, and hindered from seeing that there is a thread on one of Punch's chops, which draws it up and lets it fall at the discretion of the said Powell. The essayist mentions another and more disreputable Punch. Mayfair had been temporarily suppressed, and Steele spoke to a showwoman who had been famous for her puppets. I could not but be solicitous of her, how she had disposed of that rake-hell Punch, whose lewd life and conversation had given so much scandal, and did not a little to contribute to the ruin of the fair. She told me with a sigh that, despairing of ever reclaiming him, she would not offer to place him in a civil family, but got him a post upon a stall in Wapping, where he may be seen from sun rising to sun setting, with a glass in one hand and a pipe in the other, as sentry to a brandy shop. The following is a bill of about 1710. At Punch's Theatre, at the upper east of St. Martin's Lane, joining to Litchfield Street, will be presented a new opera performed by a company of artificial actors, who will present you with an incomparable entertainment called the Last Year's Campaign, with the famous battle fought between the Confederate army commanded by the Duke of Marlborough and the French in the woods near Blogiers, with several comical entertainments of Punch in the camp, also varieties of scenes with a most glorious prospect of both armies, the French in their entrenchments and the Confederates out, where will be seen several regiments of horse and foot, engaged in forcing the French lines, with the admirable entertainments of a girl of 5 years old dancing with swords. Note, this play will continue all the week. Box 2S, Pit 1S, Gallery 6D. A more significant performance for it made use of folk tales many years before they were adopted by the pantomimes, which were begun about this time, was that of the history of Sir Richard Whittington, in which Punch played his part so as usual. Defoe says that he was at a coffee house when the following advertisement was thrown in. At Punch's Theatre in the Little Piazza, Covent Garden, this present evening will be performed an entertainment called The History of Sir Richard Whittington, shewing his rise from a scullion to the Lord to be Lord Mayor of London, with the comical humours of old Madge, the jolly chambermaid, and the representation of the sea, and the court of Great Britain, concluding with the court of aldermen and Whittington. Lord Mayor honoured with the presence of King Henry VIII and his queens Anna Boleyn, with other diverting decorations proper to the play. Beginning at 6 of the clock. Note, no money to be returned after the entertainment is begun. Vivat Regina. Boxes 2 shillings. Pit 1. Punch was so popular that the following letter appeared in The Spectator, and in some books which deal with Punch, it is quoted or merely referred to as a genuine complaint. Although a piece of leg pulling, however, it indicates a very real state of affairs. I have been for 20 years under sexton of the parish of St. Paul's, Covent Garden, and have not missed tolling in to prayer 6 times in all those years, which office I have performed to my great satisfaction, till this fortnight last past, during which time I find my congregation take the warning of my bell morning and evening to go to a puppet show set forth by one Powell under the piazzas. By this means I have not only lost my 2 customers, whom I used to place for 6 pence a piece over against Mrs. Rachel Eyebright, but Mrs. Rachel herself is gone thither also. There now appears among us none but a few ordinary people, who come to church only to say their prayers, so that I have no work worth speaking of but on Sundays. I have placed my son at the piazzas to acquaint the ladies that the bell rings for church, and that it stands on the other side of the garden, but they only laugh at the child. I desire you would lay this before all the world, that I may not be made such a tool for the future, and that Punchinello may choose hours less canonical. As things are now, Mr. Powell has a full congregation, while we have a very thin house. Punch's theater was so well patronized that the showman was able to give a special performance for the benefit of the poor charity children of the parish. The Spectator said that this was to atone for the noise which he made in it by the constant rattling of coaches, drums, trumpets, triumphs, and battles, but said it good-naturedly and in time to give the show a free advertisement. As regards the prolonged popularity of Punch, Defoe said that by subscriptions in full houses, Powell had gathered such wealth as was 10 times sufficient to buy all the poets in England, and that he seldom went out without his chair. Defoe was so disgusted with the taste of those who flocked to the fantastic and childish entertainment that he bewailed it, with other deplorable things, in the groans of Great Britain. Writers in France, Italy, and Spain might also have groaned, for these countries were visited by the famous puppet master. In 2 of the verses of a song called Punchinello, which was popular 200 years ago, the appearance of Punch was described, and about the same time Swift gave an account of how Punch interfered mischievously with other characters and completely monopolized the attention of the audience. Says Punch himself in the first poem, "I'm that little fellow called Punchinello. Much beauty I carry about me. I'm witty and pretty, and come to delight ye. You cannot be merry without me. My cup is like a sugar loaf, and round my collar I wear a rofe. I'd strip and show you my shape and buff, but fear the ladies would flout me. My rising back and distorted breast, whene'er I show 'em, become a jest, and all in all I am one of the best, so nobody need doubt me." In spite of what is said by Punch about fear of the ladies flouting him, modesty was not one of his characteristics, any more than it was the quality of Harlequin and other Italian masks who were appearing on the stages of the regular theaters. His effect upon the other characters and upon the audience is described by Swift. Observe, the audience is in pain, while Punch is hid behind the scene. But when they hear his rusty voice, with what impatience they rejoice. And then they value not two straws, how Solomon decides the cause. Which the true mother, which pretender, not nor listen to the witch of Endor. Should Faustus with the devil behind him enter the stage, they never mind him. If Punch to stir their fancy shows, in at the door his monstrous nose, then sudden draws it back again. Oh, what a pleasure mixed with pain! You every moment think in age till he appears upon the stage. He sat on the Queen of Sheba's lap, and when the Duke of Lorraine drew his sword, he, roaring, ran and running roared. But soon he was at his tricks again. St. George himself plays the wagon and mounts astride upon the dragon. He gets 1,000 triumphs and kicks. You cannot leave his roguish tricks. 2. The coming of pantomime to the English stage early in the 18th century proved to be the undoing of the puppets, for the new form of entertainment included several of the outstanding features of the puppet shows, such as scenic splendor, dumb show, comic episodes, and even Punch himself. In some of the earlier pantomimes, there were actually two punches. Later in the century, there was even a riding punch in Astley's circus. The puppets ceased to appear in gorgeous surroundings and in front of distinguished audiences. Nevertheless, in the second half of the century, Flockton's Italian fantoccini, which were not really Italian, attracted a great deal of attention and performed before royalty. Boswell tells a good story of Goldsmith's contempt for puppets. At an exhibition in London, when those who sat next to Goldsmith observed with what dexterity a puppet was made to toss a pike, he could not bear that it should have such praise, and exclaimed with some warmth, "Pshaw, I can do it better myself." He went home with Edmund Burke to supper and broke his shin by attempting to exhibit to the company how much better he could jump over a stick than the puppets. About this time, puppets, as a rule, were barbarously formed and decorated, without the least degree of taste or propriety. They moved in a manner which showed not the skill but the ignorance and inattention of the manipulator. The dialogues were mere jumbles of nonsense, and were intermixed with immoral conversations between Punch and the fiddler. By the close of the 18th century, puppet shows were pretty well confined to the great fairs, and even at Bartholomew Fair they had become unpopular and were frequently mainly by children. Outside the fairs, the puppet showman was a squalid entertainer who traveled about with his theater on his back. Punch had rivals as a street entertainer 100 years ago, just as he has today. The late A.B. Walkley, for example, mentioned a puppet show which he saw at the corner of a Bloomsbury Square. They were wired in the grand manner of the art, but the show was lamentably poor in itself. The puppets merely danced solemnly round and round without any attempt at dramatic action. This lack of dramatic action was noticeable in the case of a much earlier rival of Punch and Judy. In 1825, the Everyday Book described some puppets called Candler's Fantoccini, which appeared in a variety program. Nothing resembling a play was performed. There were three showmen, the foreign-looking manipulator who stood inside a box theater of the usual type, the musician who beat a long drum and at the same time played a mouth organ, which was fastened round his neck, and the insistent collector. "Come, ladies and gentlemen," said the collector to the crowd that had gathered around the theater and to those who had opened their windows. "We can't begin without you. Encourage us. Some money, if you please. Please to remember what you are going to see." A good collection was taken, and the show began. The first performer was a jolly-looking puppet that did acrobatic tricks. Then came a skeleton, and to slow music it did a grave dance, during which its head dropped off and moved about the floor chattering. Another puppet exhibited balancing feats on a horizontal pole. One that was dressed as a sailor danced a hornpipe. A puppet Indian juggler threw balls. The program was not continuous, for it was suspended in order that some more money might be collected. The spirit of open mercenariness is an attractive feature of the performances of wandering entertainers. The showmen do not parade about uplift when going round with the hat. They are offering us a commodity, and if they could make more money at it, many of them would offer to sell us cabbages. And unlike Cibber and Garrick and others, when they have taken the money of their audience, they do not turn round and abuse them for having the low taste to admire the show. A Punch or Polichinelle of the Paris fairs issued a very candid and amusing address in 1726. In it, he said, Bonsoir, Monseigneur le Public, vous aurez et une plus belle harangue, si je tels mieux en fonds. Quand vous, I hope the hell there's a translation. Oh, here it is. Ah, monsieur, je vous vois. That ain't much of a fucking translation. There you go, read it yourself. I don't know what it says. It is interesting to compare the puppets already mentioned, called Candler's Fantoccini, with Cardoni's Fantoccini, which were described in a periodical some 30 years later. One of the two musicians was an old man of 70 who played on a grand piano, the performance taking place in a house attached to a shop in the East End, and the fiddler was a dark, handsome young man with jet black curly hair, which descended to his shoulders. The prices of admission were pit 4D, gallery 2D. 3 rows of red stuffed seats constituted the pit, and the gallery was a tier of bare benches rising to within a yard of the ceiling. Like the earlier variety program, the present one included a skeleton dance, a dance by a sailor, and juggling. The performance took place about the middle of the century, by which time Punch was finding it harder than ever to make both ends meet. He therefore issued a broadsheet. No tongue could tell his woes better than his own, and what versifier could excel his final rhymes? And let's take a look at the illustrations first. A 17th century French operatic dancer as Polichinelle. Puppets in 1825 by George Cruikshank. A very old friend. Our used up man has a few used up friends to breakfast, after which they derive a little real enjoyment from a dramatic entertainment by John Leech. The downfall of Punch. Your friend Punch with dromedary bunch and his pump handle snout with dromedary hunch and his pump handle snout that made little boys shout and big ones squeak and grin for a week has come to relate his declining state and chaunt you his last dying speech. Yes, times are so queer and grub's precious dear. I can't get a screw out of any of you. Without any joke, Judy's heart almost broke to think her dear Punch ain't got nothing to munch, though he's stuck to you all like a leech. Chorus. Then pity the downfall of poor Punch and Judy, and think of the times when you laughed at Mary Hunch. There's a hard run for chink. The sovereigns are light, and the silvers grab tight. Where I used to get pounds, I doesn't get browns. Together day, by gums, I got as much as thrums out of an audience of 98. 3. The end of the play was not always so happy for Punch as it is today. Although the earlier stories are unknown at the very beginning of the 19th century, Strutt said, Punch is constantly taken from the stage by the devil at the end of the puppet show. This was in accordance with the usual fate of the vice in medieval morality plays, to which popular character Punch bears a close resemblance. In spite of what Strutt said, a ballad which was written about 1790 allowed Punch to kill the devil, and at that time, and perhaps 10 years before it, a showman named McKechnie exhibited a Punch. That's unfortunate. A Punch who was the victor. This version continued to be exhibited by Pacini until long after the date at which Strutt said that the devil constantly conquered Punch. It is only right that Punch should kill the devil, although strangely enough, the moralists object and often have their way. The devil is truly that old serpent. He is the fiery dragon of ancient times, and Punch is the Beowulf, the St. George or other legendary hero who slays him. Although it is true that Punch would avoid the conflict if possible, when he finds that it is inevitable, he bears himself bravely. The struggle ends so decisively in his favor that he retains enough strength of body and exuberance of spirit to be able to whirl the archenemy round in the air and exclaim, "Huzza, huzza, the devil's dead." No other hero ever gained so decisive a victory. He is the most powerful of all legendary heroes, the most human, the most amusing, the most imperfect, and the most lovable. Besides vanquishing all his own enemies, Punch has gained a victory over a foe of puppets in general, the foe being realism. Realism would condemn him to seizure by the devil because grown-ups, who are the arch-realists, are so much immersed in the everyday life that even in a puppet play they insist upon the application of the laws and punishments of human society. In real life, it is a law that one must obey the dictates of the other members of society combined. But Punch kills people right and left because they will not let him have his own way. Grown-ups had punished him for this, but the children who became his staunchest friends towards the end of the 18th century appreciated his point of view. It is a poor child indeed that does not fight and cry in an effort to impose his will on others. It is said by a writer who is prominent as regards this particular subject that children accept Punch's many murders without reservation and without a struggle, although our italics, the wooden Punch is just as real to them as a flesh and blood murderer would be to the rest of us. This is hardly giving sufficient credit to the children. Most of them do not take him literally. They get excited, it is true, shout their applause, and even address remarks to him. This, however, is not because they think he is real, but because, like grown-ups who enjoy the piece, they are responding to the appeal to their imagination. Punch is a work of imagination. He is made of wood. He moves against the background of unrealistic scenery and pops up out of nowhere. He performs antics that would be impossible to the most agile and flexible of human acrobats, and wields with the greatest of ease a stick which, in comparison with his size, is almost a battering ram. He kills people with a heartless frequency and impunity which remove him from the sphere of actuality. It has frequently been said, and has often been hotly denied, that art and morality are separate, that the function of art is to stimulate the imagination. Pardon? Not to inculcate moral lessons. This is the inarticulated opinion of children who enjoy and applaud the successive murders committed by Punch. Except we become as one of these, we shall not enter into the kingdom of the poet. The poet is of imagination all compact. He can see things in real life, nor heed nor see what things they be, but in Punch and Judy he offers forms more real than living man. And children respond to his frank appeal to their imagination. By nature, children agree with Punch's premise that one should vigorously insist upon getting one's own way. Adults do not naturally accept the antisocial premise, As a result, they do not follow Punch's career in a sympathetic manner, except when, by using their imagination, they manage to throw off some of the shackles of moral philosophy. They are then able to do with more or less difficulty what comes easily to children. Even then, however, not every grown up who starts off with Punch can stick the pace. The adult tries to be cheerful, but philosophy keeps breaking in. Puppets in general have a number of friends among the intelligentsia. That great man of the theater, Mr. Gordon Craig, prefers them to men and women players. They have no personality of their own, no moods, no emotions, no liability to become tired. Like the materials of a painter, therefore, they are fit tools with which the artist director may produce an effect that he desires. As an illustration of one of the points in favor of the puppets, their superiority over flesh and blood actors, as regards vigor, one may recall an incident in the life of Grimaldi. He played the part of Punch in a Drury Lane pantomime and changed afterwards to clown. His performance as Punch so delighted Sheridan that he asked him to play the same part throughout the whole pantomime. From the point of view of art, this was clearly desirable, and if the player had been the usual puppet, there would not have been the slightest difficulty about the matter. But Grimaldi, although he was young and strong and willing, was only human. The heavy hump which he had to wear on his chest, the heavy hump on his back, the heavy shoes on his feet, and the last straws in the shape of a high sugar loaf cap and long-nosed mask were too much for him when combined with the exertions of impersonating the irrepressible Punch. He was compelled by fatigue to cease playing Punch, and at the end of the sixth scene, he assumed the dress of clown. Mr. Maurice Baring has said that he would like to see not only a wholesale revival of Punch and Judy, but a host of puppet shows all over the country, for which the foremost poets of the age, and in fact all the poets, old and young, should write plays. Poets, not the usual type of realistic writer, because the stage is essentially sham and make-believe, especially the puppet stage, and the more artificial it is, the greater will be its poetic reality. Mr. Baring wants the attention of theater audiences to be concentrated on the actors, as it is in Punch and Judy, and not, as in many theatrical productions, on scenery, incidental music, limelight effects, and other accessories, which detract attention from the play and stifle it. In Punch and Judy, he says, the play and nothing but the play is the thing. That is perhaps why it is the best of all plays. And now for a sample of the play itself. The version from which the extract is taken was performed in the streets of London by McKechnie, an elderly Italian of outstanding skill and intelligence, who gave a special exhibition for the benefit of J. Payne Collier and George Cruikshank just over a century ago. The former noted down the words and the actions, and the artist stopped the performance at the most interesting parts to sketch the figures. The version is not absolutely accurate. It was compared with and amended by the representations of other showmen, and in compliance with the refined taste of the present age, certain parts were softened down and some of the jokes omitted. It is necessary to bear this in mind if one is really desirous of understanding the nature of the play as it was then produced. Readers of the Bowdlerized version of Shakespeare, which was presented to the very same refined public, will realize how much that is valuable may be lost when a popular entertainment is interfered with so that it may be acceptable to people for whom it was never intended. Nevertheless, just as Falstaff is good company, even when, comparatively, he is made by reformers to speak with the tongues of angels, so his friend Punch, who resembles him in many ways, is enterprising in the following version. For happily, a wholly refined punch like a wholly refined Falstaff or Juliet's nurse is an impossibility. Refine him sufficiently, and you kill him, and he were better dead. I think I will stop here, just because this is the whole play. All right, so we're going to hold off on the Punch and Judy play, unless someone pays me $14 billion to continue. All right, Bobs. That's the first half of chapter 4, is it? There we go. Guten Abend, motherfuckers.